History is often written by the victors, but what if the true architects of our modern world were not kings or generals, but something much smaller? Welcome to About Untold History. I am Elias Untold Vance, and today we are peeling back the layers of time to uncover the forgotten giants of industry. We aren't talking about steel, coal, or oil. We are talking about insects. From the mesmerizing shimmer of silk that once dictated the wealth of emperors, to the intense, blood-red pigment that triggered colonial trade wars. These tiny creatures were the hidden catalysts of global movement. Prepare to look at the past through a lens you never imagined, as we reveal how the natural world silently forged the paths we walk today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. The narrative of human civilization is frequently depicted as a series of monumental events, battles fought, treaties signed, and technological leaps. However, there exists a subterranean layer to this history, one driven by biology, necessity, and the extraordinary capacities of the insect world. To understand the foundations of global trade, one must look at the Bombyx mori, the domestic silkworm. This creature, unassuming in its larval stage, became the engine of the most extensive commercial network in the ancient world, the Silk Road. The cultivation of silk, or sericulture, was a closely guarded secret of the Chinese dynasties for over 3 millennia. It was not merely the production of a textile, it was the generation of a currency. Silk became a medium of exchange, a diplomatic tool used to appease nomadic invaders, and a status symbol that redefined social hierarchies from the Han Dynasty to the Roman Empire. The demand for this shimmering, durable, and lightweight material forced the creation of infrastructure that spanned thousands of miles, crossing perilous deserts, freezing mountain ranges, and unpredictable river valleys. This was the birth of global connectivity. But why was this specific moth so critical? The life cycle of the Bombyx mori requires a level of human intervention that essentially forced the development of specialized labor and agricultural settlements. The process of harvesting silk from the cocoons is an intricate ballet of heat, water, and precision. Once the moth spins its cocoon, a single continuous thread that can reach up to 900 meters in length, the biological integrity of the fiber must be maintained through delicate extraction. This necessity meant that wherever silk production thrived, urban centers blossomed. We see the emergence of specialized towns where the climate was moderated for the health of the larvae, and where thousands of hands were employed in the labor-intensive tasks of unspooling, spinning, and weaving. As the appetite for silk grew in Rome, the economic implications were profound. Historians note that the massive outflow of gold from the Roman Empire to the east to pay for these luxury textiles caused significant inflation and internal economic instability. In a very literal sense, the appetite for the labor of a moth strained the treasuries of the world's most powerful empire. The trade routes were not just paved with stone. They were lubricated by the demand for insect-derived luxury. Merchants traveled from the Mediterranean to the Xi'an province, bringing with them ideas, religions, and technologies, all because a specific insect possessed the ability to create a fiber stronger than steel relative to its weight. The domestication of the silkworm represents perhaps the earliest instance of industrial bioengineering in human history. The moth lost its ability to fly or survive in the wild due to thousands of years of selective breeding for the quality of its silk. It became a permanent ward of human society, a biological engine designed specifically for economic production. This dependency illustrates the profound interconnectedness between human ambition and insect physiology. As we examine the structural evolution of the Silk Road, we find that the entire geography of the ancient world was effectively redrawn to facilitate the transport of this single insect product. The oasis towns of Central Asia were not randomly placed. They were nodes in a massive logistical network dictated by the storage, transportation, and trade requirements of silk. Furthermore, the social structure of ancient societies was deeply influenced by the production of silk. It defined the dress codes of nobility, the tax systems of empires, and the geopolitical alliances between warring tribes. The Silk Road was not merely a route. It was an environment, a complex ecosystem of humans and insects working in tandem. The labor of the silkworm allowed dynasties to project power far beyond their borders without firing a single arrow. It was a soft power dominance that lasted for centuries. As we continue to investigate this history, we begin to see that the economic foundations of our ancestors were built upon the biological output of organisms they carefully nurtured, protected, and exploited. The sheer scale of this industry, when quantified in the amount of land utilized for mulberry tree cultivation and the number of cocoons processed annually, reveals an agricultural effort of unimaginable proportions. This was the first true global supply chain, and it was held together by the silk of a moth. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. While the silkworm wove the fabric of the ancient world, a far smaller, arguably more aggressive, and politically explosive insect was about to rewrite the history of the Americas and the wealth of Europe. The Cochineal, Dactylopius coccus. This tiny scale insect, a parasite living on the Opuntia cactus, holds a distinction in history that few other organisms can claim. It became the second most valuable product exported from the New World, surpassed only by silver. To the Spanish Empire, the cochineal was not just a bug. It was a fountain of liquid gold that fueled the expansion of colonial power and defined the aesthetic of luxury for centuries. The story of the cochineal is one of obsession. For the indigenous peoples of Mexico, the insect was a masterfully managed agricultural asset. They cultivated the nopal cactus with a level of precision that allowed them to harvest the female insects, the source of the highly sought-after carminic acid, in massive quantities. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they were initially blinded by the pursuit of gold. But it did not take them long to realize that the local trade in blood-red dye was a vastly more sustainable and reliable source of revenue. The dye was so vibrant, so concentrated, and so light-fast compared to the European alternatives like madder root or kermes that it essentially rendered all other red dyes obsolete for the highest echelons of society. The geopolitical impact of this insect was staggering. Spain established a state monopoly on the trade, guarding the origins of the cochineal with extreme jealousy. For years, European powers were baffled by the nature of the dye. Was it a seed? Was it a dried berry? Was it a mineral? Because the Spanish kept the secret of the insect's identity, a massive clandestine scientific race began. Nations spent fortunes attempting to cultivate the insect elsewhere, or to synthesize the pigment. But the cochineal proved as resilient as it was valuable. The color it produced, a deep, regal, and intense crimson, became the signature color of the British redcoats, the robes of cardinals, and the finery of the Dutch nobility. The economic infrastructure required to move this product was immense. The cochineal trade helped finance the Spanish fleets, connected the ports of Veracruz to Seville, and eventually, through the Manila galleons, linked the Americas to the Asian markets. The demand for this insect created a red fever that influenced global fashion and art. Painters like Rembrandt and Vermeer relied on cochineal pigments to achieve the depth and luminosity in their works that defined the Dutch Golden Age. The sheer volume of dried insects required to meet global demand meant that millions of hectares of cactus farms were maintained, creating a unique agricultural landscape that spanned across the Americas. However, the cochineal's influence was not merely financial. it was deeply colonial. The management of these insects meant the displacement of indigenous agricultural practices in favor of a centralized, extractive colonial economy. The labor required to brush the tiny insects from the cactus pads, dry them, and ship them to the coast was grueling. Yet it was the silent engine of Spanish dominance. In a sense, the British Empire's iconic redcoat uniform, which served as a symbol of colonial authority, was fundamentally powered by a bug harvested in the distant mountains of Mexico. This is the profound irony of the colonial era. The symbols of European power were literally colored by the natural resources of the lands they sought to control. As we move further into the industrial era, the Cochineal story continues to evolve. When synthetic dyes were finally developed in the 19th century, many thought the cochineal trade would collapse. Yet, it persisted. The demand for natural, safe, and stable pigments remains so high that even today this small-scale insect is harvested for use in cosmetics, textiles, and even food. The legacy of the cochineal is a testament to how a single biological entity can dictate the movement of global capital, influence artistic expression, and serve as a silent agent in the construction of geopolitical empires. It teaches us that the history of trade is not just a history of human endeavor, but a history of our relationship with the biological world, a relationship that has often been defined by greed, innovation, and an unrelenting pursuit of the perfect color. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. If the silkworm and the cochineal defined the wealth of empires, the honeybee Apis mellifera defined the lighting, communication, and mechanical efficiency of the pre-industrial and early industrial worlds. Long before the invention of the electric bulb or the mastery of petroleum-based paraffin, humanity relied on a single labor-intensive substance to illuminate its nights, seal its documents, and ensure the smooth operation of its growing mechanical ingenuity: beeswax. This substance was not merely a byproduct. It was an essential industrial raw material that enabled the rapid spread of literacy, the security of international diplomacy, and the precision of fine craftsmanship. The significance of beeswax in the annals of history is often overlooked. Yet it was the primary material for candles, which were the only viable light source for indoor work, study, and prayer for centuries. Unlike animal tallow, which burned with a smoky, foul-smelling flame, beeswax burned clean, bright, and steady. For the burgeoning intellectual class, the monk in his scriptorium, and the merchant drafting contracts, the quality of light provided by beeswax was a luxury that facilitated the expansion of knowledge. The church, in particular, maintained a massive demand for beeswax candles for liturgical use, creating a reliable, high-value market that incentivized beekeeping on an industrial scale across Europe and the Mediterranean. Beyond illumination, the physical properties of beeswax, its malleability, water repellency, and stability, made it the primary sealing agent of the medieval and early modern worlds. Every crown decree, every trade agreement, and every private letter was secured with a wax seal. This was the fundamental security protocol of the era. The production of wax became a logistical necessity for the state. If you were a ruler, you needed control over your wax supply to ensure that your decrees could be authenticated and that your correspondence remained private. This created a network of apiaries that were effectively state-sponsored agricultural sites, integrated into the feudal economy to support the administrative needs of the ruling elite. The industrial application of beeswax extended deep into the mechanics of the time as well. It served as a vital lubricant in early precision instruments, clockmaking, and even in the development of early metallurgical techniques. When fine machinery was being crafted, beeswax was used for lost wax casting, a process where a detailed wax model is encased in clay and melted away, leaving a perfect mold for bronze or silver. This technique allowed for the creation of intricate gear systems and artistic masterpieces alike. Without the specific chemical stability of beeswax, the advancement of mechanical precision would have been significantly delayed. The humble honeybee was essentially the silent partner of the engineer and the artisan. As the world transitioned toward the Industrial Revolution, the reliance on beeswax remained critical even as new technologies emerged. It was used in the textile industry to coat threads, in shipbuilding to seal joints, and in the early stages of photography for light-sensitive coatings. The logistics of the bee trade were complex. Swarms were transported across borders, and the bee masters were highly skilled professionals whose knowledge was passed down through generations. The sudden death of hives could disrupt entire local economies, causing spikes in the price of candles and sealing wax, which in turn hindered the administrative capacity of regional governments. Looking back at this era, we realize that the work of the hive was fundamentally intertwined with the work of the human state. The sheer output of beeswax required to sustain the European administrative machine required an astronomical number of bees. This relationship necessitated a deep understanding of entomology, which predates modern science by centuries. Beekeepers were the first true population managers, optimizing the health and output of a species to support human progress. They were the ones who ensured that the light stayed on in the darkest hours of winter, that the letters of diplomacy remained sealed, and that the fine parts of a clock fit together with absolute perfection. The honeybee was the unsung hero of the pre-electric age, a living factory that turned nectar into the very material that enabled the advancement of Western thought, law, and mechanical science. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. While silk and cochineal were capturing the imaginations and treasuries of the West, another insect-derived substance was quietly establishing itself as the pinnacle of Asian craftsmanship and global luxury. Produced by the carrier laca, a tiny-scale insect native to the forests of Southeast Asia and India, the resinous substance known as lax, or shellac in its refined form, became the backbone of a sophisticated, artistic, and industrial tradition. This secretion, used by the insect to protect itself on tree branches, is a marvel of biological engineering, a natural thermoplastic that could be dissolved, molded, polished, and dyed, creating a finish that was unmatched in its durability and luster. The history of lac is inextricably linked to the development of the lacquered arts of East Asia, particularly in China, Japan, and Vietnam. The process of applying layers of refined lac, often dozens or even hundreds of times, to wooden or metallic objects created surfaces that were impervious to moisture, heat, and decay. This was not merely decorative. It was a structural upgrade for everyday items, from imperial thrones and ornate screens to medicinal boxes and ceremonial armor. Lacquered objects possessed a depth and glow that suggested wealth and permanence. For centuries, the secret of refining this insect secretion into a stable, high-gloss finish was a testament to the advanced chemical knowledge of Asian artisans, who understood how to harvest, purify, and color the resin to achieve aesthetic perfection. When European merchants arrived in Asia, they were immediately captivated by the exotic beauty of lacquered ware. The arrival of these pieces in Europe triggered a phenomenon known as Japonismo or chinoiserie, where European cabinet makers attempted to replicate the effect with inferior varnishes. The term Japanning became the European industry's desperate, often clumsy, attempt to mimic the brilliance of the insect-derived original. The trade in raw lac soon became a significant component of the East India Company's operations. Merchants realized that while the finished lacquerware was difficult to transport, The raw resin could be processed and used as a varnish for European furniture, musical instruments, and later for insulation in the fledgling electrical industry. The economic power of the lac-producing regions was built upon the careful management of forest ecosystems. Unlike the intensive plantation farming of the silkworm, the harvest of lac required a symbiotic relationship with specific host trees in tropical forests. This created a decentralized but highly valuable economy where indigenous communities were the primary suppliers of a global commodity. As the global demand for durable finishes increased, the lac trade expanded, influencing trade policies, establishing new ports, and fostering cross-cultural technological exchange. The resin was, in many ways, the plastic of the pre-synthetic era. It was used in everything from the sealing of wax records, the very first precursors to recorded sound, to the early development of insulating coatings for telegraph wires. The versatility of Cariolaca secretions meant that the insect's impact was felt far beyond the world of art. Its insulating properties were discovered to be exceptional during the early experiments with electricity. Before the invention of modern plastics like Bakelite, shellac was the premier electrical insulator. It was used to coat the internal components of electrical machinery, switches, and the first vacuum tubes. The global industrial expansion of the late 19th and early 20th centuries was, quite literally, insulated by the secretions of a tiny-scale insect. The rapid growth of urban electrification in the West was supported by a supply chain that stretched back to the humid forests of the East, where this biological product was refined and shipped in millions of tons. This highlights a profound narrative in the history of global industry: the seamless transition from the biological to the technological. The same material that was used to decorate a 14th century emperor's private chamber was, centuries later, used to insulate the circuits that powered the telegraphs connecting distant continents. It is a striking example of how nature provides the solutions for human ambition before our own synthetic capabilities catch up. The lac insect was not just an artist's material, it was an industrial pioneer. As we reflect on this, we see that the technological marvels we often attribute solely to human ingenuity were, in reality, built upon the foundation of biological materials that we learn to harvest, manipulate, and eventually weave into the fabric of our industrial civilization. The lacquered empire was not just a symbol of Asian opulence. It was a hidden, essential component of the global machine that pushed humanity into the modern age. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. History is often framed by the brilliance of tacticians, the courage of soldiers, and the might of empires. Yet, in the humid mosquito-infested jungles of the tropics, or the marshy lowlands of campaign trails, the ultimate arbiter of victory was not a king, but a fly. The impact of insect-borne diseases on military logistics and the outcome of major conflicts is one of the most significant, yet frequently ignored, variables in the history of warfare. From the ancient world to the colonial expansions of the 19th century, armies were decimated not by enemy steel, but by the microscopic pathogens carried by mosquitoes, tsetse flies, and lice. Consider the conquest of the Caribbean and the fever-ridden coasts of Africa during the era of European expansion. The colonization of these regions was constantly checked by the relentless toll of yellow fever and malaria. These diseases, transmitted by the Aedes aegypti and Anopheles mosquitoes, acted as a biological barrier that effectively prevented European armies from maintaining a permanent foothold for decades. Generals would prepare for battle against indigenous forces, only to find their ranks thinned to nothingness by debilitating fevers. The white man's grave, as West Africa was notoriously called, was a moniker earned solely through the biological efficacy of the mosquito. This forced colonizers to fundamentally rethink their logistical operations, leading to the development of quinine-based medicinal strategies and the birth of tropical medicine as a scientific discipline. The impact was even more pronounced in the American Civil War, where dysentery, spread in part by houseflies, killed more soldiers than direct combat. Flies served as vectors for pathogens, moving from latrines to food rations with terrifying efficiency. The military command, initially unaware of the link between sanitation and insect-borne disease, suffered catastrophic losses. It was only through the eventual implementation of rigorous camp sanitation protocols, inspired by the realization that the fly was a lethal logistical agent, that mortality rates were curtailed. The fly, in this context, dictated the pace of campaigns and the feasibility of holding specific territories. Furthermore, the tsetse fly's role in Africa is perhaps the most profound example of an insect altering historical trajectory. By transmitting trypanosomiasis, or sleeping sickness, to both humans and livestock, the tsetse fly effectively prevented the use of horses and oxen in vast swathes of sub-Saharan Africa. This meant that the logistical power of cavalry, heavy transport, and deep inland penetration, which defined European and Asian military history, was neutralized. Empires could not project force in these regions in the same way they did on the steppes of Eurasia or the plains of Europe. The fly belt of Africa created a massive defensive perimeter that kept many inland societies autonomous for much longer than they might have been otherwise. The tsetse fly was a silent guardian of territorial sovereignty, dictating the limits of imperial reach through its presence. As we analyze military history through this biological lens, it becomes clear that logistical planning was always a race against the insect. Supplying an army meant moving it through landscapes where insects were present, and every day spent on the march through a hot zone was a gamble with the health of the troops. The evolution of military infrastructure, such as the creation of mosquito-proof housing, the development of specialized clothing, and the advancement of chemical repellents, was a direct response to the pressure exerted by these tiny adversaries. This was a war of attrition where the opponent was not an army, but an ecosystem. Ultimately, the insect's influence on warfare reminds us that human agency is heavily constrained by biological reality. We have spent millennia attempting to dominate the globe, only to be repeatedly pushed back by creatures that weigh less than a gram. The military victories of the past were often achieved only when commanders learned to respect the biological limits of their environment. By ignoring the fly, the mosquito, and the louse, emperors and generals were not just failing in their tactics. They were failing to understand the primary logistical challenge of their existence. The history of war is, in essence, the history of our struggle to conquer, or at least survive, the insect-driven burdens of the natural world. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. While the silkworm and the cochineal beetle were direct commodities, the honeybee's true historical value lay in its role as the invisible partner of human expansion, the pollinator. As humanity shifted from nomadic gathering to sedentary agriculture, our success became inextricably linked to the efficiency of the bees we kept. This was not just about the honey or the wax. It was about the fundamental transformation of the landscape. By domesticating the honeybee, early civilizations unknowingly engineered the productivity of their own food systems, effectively creating a bio-industrial cycle that supported the rise of cities, the stability of empires, and the survival of all growing populations. The historical shift toward mass-scale fruit, vegetable, and nut production was facilitated almost entirely by the presence of managed apiaries. When humans moved into new territories, they brought their bees with them. This was a classic case of niche construction. By importing a versatile pollinator, settlers could guarantee the success of crops that might otherwise fail in an alien environment. The honeybee became a prerequisite for the colonial project. In the Americas, for example, the introduction of the Apis mellifera by European settlers was a quiet revolution. It enabled the cultivation of orchard crops and clover that fundamentally altered the North American prairie, turning wild landscapes into productive agricultural zones that could sustain permanent European settlements. This process of pollination of empires dictated the speed at which civilizations could grow. A kingdom that mastered the art of apiculture could support a larger population with a more diverse diet. The integration of bees into the agricultural framework meant that orchards were not merely collections of trees. They were highly productive, managed energy systems. This agricultural surplus, in turn, freed up labor for other pursuits: engineering, art, warfare, and administration. The honeybee was a silent catalyst for urbanization. Without the consistent, reliable pollination provided by managed hives, the agricultural output of the medieval and early modern periods would have been significantly lower, preventing the population booms that paved the way for the Industrial Revolution. However, the reliance on managed pollinators also created vulnerabilities. The pollination gap, a term we might use to describe the dependency of a state on its bee populations, became a strategic concern. If a drought or disease affected the bees, the entire harvest was at risk. Historical records from the 17th and 18th centuries often show government concern for the health of bee colonies, recognizing that the prosperity of the rural economy was tied to the well-being of the hive. This led to early agricultural policies focused on the protection and promotion of beekeeping. The state recognized that the bee was a critical component of the national infrastructure, no different from roads, ports, or markets. The expansion of global agriculture was not a linear path of human innovation. It was a collaborative endeavor between human labor and insect labor. As humans colonized the globe, they effectively created a honeybee diaspora. This massive biological migration changed the genetic landscape of ecosystems worldwide. In every place where the honeybee took hold, the botanical composition of the environment began to shift, favoring plants that were dependent on or benefited from bee pollination. This was an unintended but profound act of environmental engineering. We did not just build civilizations. We built landscapes designed for the bee, and in return the bee built the agricultural base that sustained us. This relationship between humans and bees serves as a stark reminder of our dependence on the natural world. Our modern agricultural systems, with their massive monocultures, remain heavily reliant on the same fundamental mechanism that supported the farmers of antiquity. When we view history through the lens of pollination, we see that the rise of global powers was never just about the strength of their armies or the depth of their treasuries. It was also about their ability to harness the biological labor of the honeybee to create a reliable and abundant food supply. The bee was, and remains, the ultimate engine of productivity, a tiny buzzing sovereign that has, throughout history, held the keys to human demographic success and agricultural stability. We are, and have always been, a species supported by the tireless labor of pollinators. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. While we have explored the insects that powered empires through silk, dye, wax, and pollination, we must acknowledge the flip side of this biological coin: the insects that have historically dismantled human ambition. The relationship between humanity and the insect world is not merely one of exploitation. It is a brutal, perpetual competition for resources. Throughout history, whenever human civilization has achieved a surplus in food production, Insects have been there to reclaim it. The history of the global food crisis is, in many ways, the history of our failure to outsmart the locust, the weevil, and the aphid. These pests of progress have arguably shaped the development of human agriculture and trade policies more than any other biological factor. The locust, Schistocerca gregaria and others, stands as the ultimate symbol of this devastation. The historical records of locust swarms are terrifying accounts of sudden, total agricultural collapse. A single swarm, spanning miles and numbering in the billions, could consume the entire harvest of a region in hours, leading to immediate famine, social unrest, and the migration of entire populations. In the ancient world, locust swarms were interpreted as divine wrath, but they were, in reality, a logistical disaster of the highest order. The inability of states to manage or mitigate these swarms was a key driver of political instability. If a pharaoh or an emperor could not protect the grain supply from the swarm, their legitimacy was questioned, and their empire was weakened from within. The impact of the weevil and other grain storage insects was equally profound, though perhaps less dramatic than the locust. As trade routes expanded and centralized grain storage became a requirement for sustaining large urban populations, weevils became the silent destroyers of the human food chain. A shipment of grain arriving in Rome or London infested with weevils was not just a commercial loss. It was a threat to the food security of the city. This reality forced the development of new technologies in storage, fumigation, and trade logistics. The history of the grain trade, a pillar of global commerce, is deeply influenced by the constant, desperate need to keep the supply chain insect-free. Furthermore, as we move toward monoculture farming, we unknowingly created insect paradises. By planting vast fields of a single crop, we provided a massive, concentrated food source for insects that specialized in that plant. The aphid and the beetle flourished in these environments. This evolutionary response of the insect world to human agriculture necessitated the birth of the chemical industry. The development of pesticides was a direct, often desperate, response to the threats posed by these insects to our industrial food systems. We effectively traded the biological complexity of the ecosystem for a simplified, brittle system that required constant, aggressive human intervention to prevent total collapse. This pestilence of progress highlights the unintended consequences of human expansion. We sought to simplify the natural world to make it more productive for our needs, but in doing so, we created an environment perfectly suited for our competitors. Every step forward in agricultural yield was met by an evolutionary shift in the insect population. The struggle to feed the global population is an ongoing high-stakes game of biological chess. We are constantly innovating new methods, genetic modification, integrated pest management, and biological control to stay one step ahead of the insects that seek to claim the surplus we produce. The history of the food crisis, therefore, is not just a story of droughts, floods, or economic mismanagement. It is the story of our biological rivalry. When we look at the ruins of ancient granaries or the records of historical famines, we are looking at the sites of our failures to contain the insect world. Today, with a global population reaching unprecedented levels, the pressure to secure our food supply is higher than ever. The lessons of the past remain. We cannot simply dominate the environment. We must understand it. The insects that threaten our food supply are not merely pests to be eradicated. They are a fundamental part of the ecosystem that we have chosen to manipulate. To manage our food security, we must manage our relationship with the insects that have, for thousands of years, ensured that our progress never came without a cost. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. The history of human communication is often told through the evolution of languages, alphabets, and printing presses. Yet, the physical substrate of this history, the parchment, the paper, the binding, and the glue, was perpetually under siege by a relentless enemy, the bookworm. In this context, bookworm is not a metaphor for a studious individual, but a literal biological menace. The survival of human knowledge, bureaucratic records, and religious texts for centuries was a direct result of our ability to protect these delicate materials from the insatiable appetites of silverfish, beetles, and termites. The race to archive human history was, in truth, a logistical defense operation against the insect world. The preservation of the written word in the ancient and medieval worlds required sophisticated knowledge of materials. Papyrus, parchment, and eventually paper were all attractive food sources for insects. The glues used in book binding, often derived from animal hides or starch, were essentially gourmet meals for a variety of beetle species. Librarians in the great libraries of antiquity, such as those in Alexandria or the Imperial Archives of China, were not just curators. They were managers of a biological containment system. They utilized natural repellents, such as cedar oil, cloves, and heavy incense, to create a toxic environment for insects, effectively developing the first chemical preservation strategies in history. This struggle fundamentally influenced the evolution of record-keeping. The move from fragile scrolls to sturdier, treated codices was driven by a need for longevity in the face of environmental rot and insect damage. The archival standards of modern bureaucracies are built upon centuries of trial and error in combating the destructive nature of insects. Every time a record was lost to history, it was frequently because an insect had literally digested the information. The historical record is, therefore, a survivor, a curated subset of the past that managed to escape the path of the silverfish and the termite. We are reading only the parts of history that were lucky enough to be left uneaten. Furthermore, the materials of communication were also influenced by the substances that insects provided. We have discussed shellac and beeswax. These were not just for industry, but for the very security of the document. The wax seal, as noted, was the lock on the door of international diplomacy, but it was also a structural addition that deterred insects from reaching the parchment underneath. The varnishes applied to covers served as a protective armor. The history of the book is an architectural history of defense. When we look at the intricate, heavy bindings of medieval manuscripts, we are seeing the necessity of creating a barrier that even the most persistent beetle could not breach. The impact of termites in tropical regions was particularly devastating for the accumulation of records. In areas where termites flourished, the concept of a permanent library or archive was nearly impossible to maintain using conventional materials. This forced these societies to develop oral traditions and alternative methods of memory keeping that did not rely on paper. A clear example of how insect geography dictated cultural and intellectual evolution. The presence of the termite forced a different mode of knowledge retention, one that was biological and social rather than physical and stationary. As we moved into the industrial era, the battle escalated. The introduction of mass-produced, acidic paper provided insects with an even more accessible food source. The librarians and archivists of the 19th and 20th centuries were in a constant state of war against insect populations, leading to the development of sophisticated fumigation protocols and climate-controlled storage. The modern library, with its controlled humidity, filtered air, and chemical barriers, is the ultimate fortification against the insect world. We have effectively created a sterile, hostile environment for them to ensure the survival of our knowledge. The paper trail of human history is, at every turn, a chronicle of our defense against the organisms that seek to return our knowledge to the earth. To study history is to appreciate the sheer resilience of the documents that survived, and to recognize that for every book we read, countless others were claimed by the quiet, tireless hunger of the insect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. The transition from artisanal craft to industrial-scale manufacturing was not merely a matter of steam engines and iron gears. It was a revolution in the management of materials. In this great industrial shift, the structures and secretions of insects provided the blueprints for our most advanced engineering feats. The spider's silk, the honeycomb's geometry, and the termitus architecture were not just wonders of nature. They were the foundational models for efficiency, load-bearing, and material science that we desperately needed to scale our own industrial output. We did not simply invent the modern factory. We learned from the insects that had mastered the art of high-output, low-waste production long before we ever conceived of an assembly line. Consider the geometry of the honeycomb. The hexagonal structure of the bee's hive is the most efficient configuration in the natural world for maximizing storage capacity, while minimizing the amount of material used. As engineers in the 18th and 19th centuries sought to build stronger, lighter, and more efficient storage vessels and architectural components, the study of the honeybee's comb became a central focus. The hexagonal grid, now ubiquitous in modern manufacturing and aerospace, is a direct inheritance from our observation of the hive. By copying this geometry, we learned how to distribute stress, maximize space, and improve the structural integrity of our own industrial creations. The bee was the original master of optimization, a lesson that was applied to everything from the development of high-pressure boilers to the design of advanced structural steel. The spider's web, meanwhile, presented a challenge in materials science that arguably drove the development of the synthetic fiber industry. The strength-to-weight ratio of spider silk is superior to that of high-grade steel, a fact that was well known to early naturalists and engineers. The obsession with replicating this biofiber led to the development of early synthetic polymers, as we attempted to mirror the chemical process of protein polymerization that spiders perform with effortless precision. While we struggled for centuries to reach the durability of spider silk, the quest itself pushed the boundaries of chemistry and textile engineering, leading to the creation of materials that define our modern world: nylon, polyester, and aramid fibers. Furthermore, the termite mound served as a masterclass in passive environmental engineering. In regions where termites thrive, their mounds maintain a constant internal temperature and humidity, regardless of extreme external fluctuations. This is achieved through a sophisticated, self-regulating system of chimneys and air vents. As we began to industrialize, the need to maintain stable environments for sensitive machinery and human workers became a massive logistical hurdle. The termite architecture became a model for our own climate control systems. Today, we design sustainable buildings that mirror the thermal efficiency of a termite mound, a testament to the fact that insects had successfully addressed the logistical challenges of environmental regulation millions of years before we did. This cross-pollination between entomology and industrial engineering illustrates a pivotal shift in human history. The recognition that the natural world is a repository of proven, highly optimized technological solutions. Our Industrial Revolution was essentially a period where we stopped trying to brute force our way through engineering challenges and started to look at the biological patterns provided by insects. When we look at a modern manufacturing plant, an airplane fuselage, or a climate-controlled warehouse, we are looking at the legacy of this observation. We have integrated the insect's work into our own industrial infrastructure. Ultimately, the history of industrial engineering is the history of our apprenticeship to the insect. We spent millennia building by trial and error, only to realize that the solutions we were searching for were already operating in the fields and forests around us. The insects, in their complex social structures and individual biological outputs, provided the templates for structural optimization, material strength, and thermal efficiency. The modern world is not a purely human invention. It is a bio-inspired construct. Our machines, our factories, and our structural designs are the physical realization of a dialogue with the insect world. A dialogue that began with simple observation and culminated in the sophisticated engineering that sustains our global civilization. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. As we delve deeper into the 21st century, the insect world has shifted from being a source of raw materials to a goldmine of biological information. Modern pharmacology and biotechnology are currently undergoing a bioprospecting revolution, where the unique chemical compounds synthesized by insects are being scrutinized for their potential to cure human diseases, stabilize vaccines, and create teas. New classes of antibiotics. This represents the ultimate evolution of our relationship with the insect. We have moved beyond harvesting their products to decoding their genetic and chemical secrets. The insect is no longer just a worker in our fields. It is a laboratory of infinite complexity, offering solutions that traditional human synthetic chemistry has struggled to produce for decades. The potential of insect-derived peptides is a frontier of medicine. Many insects possess potent antimicrobial compounds that allow them to survive in environments teeming with bacteria and fungi. These insect antibiotics are structurally different from the ones we have historically used, offering a potential solution to the growing crisis of antibiotic resistance. Researchers are currently isolating these molecules from the hemolymph of various beetles, flies, and caterpillars to develop treatments for drug-resistant pathogens. The defensive mechanisms that an insect uses to survive a simple mud puddle are now being re-engineered into life-saving drugs for human patients. This is the new age of insect-led pharmacology, where the insect's own survival strategy becomes the template for our medical defense. Beyond antibiotics, the venom of various insects is being investigated for applications in pain management, cancer treatment, and neurology. Compounds found in wasp and bee venoms, for example, have shown remarkable specificity in targeting certain types of cells, offering the possibility of smart drugs that can attack tumors without damaging surrounding healthy tissue. The complexity of these venoms, which are effectively cocktails of highly evolved neurotoxins, requires sophisticated biotechnology to decode and safely synthesize. We are no longer just using the substance. We are using the blueprint of the venom to build drugs that can regulate cellular signaling in ways that are precise and highly efficient. Biotechnology is also utilizing the insect's unique physiology for the production of complex proteins. Certain moth species are being used as living factories to produce vaccines and therapeutic proteins that are difficult or impossible to manufacture in traditional bacterial cultures. By modifying the genetic structure of these insects, scientists can leverage their biological efficiency to churn out specialized molecules at a fraction of the cost and complexity of existing bioreactors. This is an integration of biotechnology and entomology that blurs the line between organism and machine. The moth is becoming a precision instrument for the production of modern medicine, a biological pipeline that is remarkably stable and scalable. The economic implications of this microscopic fortune are profound. Just as the silk trade once dictated the wealth of the ancient world, the intellectual property associated with insect-derived peptides and proteins is currently fueling a multi-billion-dollar biotechnology sector. Nations and corporations are racing to catalog the chemical diversity of insect species, recognizing that the next wonder drug might be hidden in the salivary glands of a beetle or the wing scales of a moth. This is the modern Silk Road, a path of information and chemical innovation that is far more valuable than the physical goods of the past. Ultimately, this shift represents our final maturation in our relationship with the insect world. We are moving toward a model of partnership based on deep, molecular-level understanding. We are learning to speak the language of insect chemistry, using their evolutionary triumphs to augment our own fragile biological systems. The insects have been conducting research in pharmacology for millions of years, constantly innovating their defensive and offensive capabilities through the crucible of natural selection. By tapping into this ancient library of chemical experience, we are not just discovering new treatments. We are gaining access to a master-level curriculum in survival and adaptation. The future of medicine, therefore, is not just found in the depths of our laboratories, but in the buzzing, crawling, and hidden lives of the insects that surround us, holding the keys to the next generation of human health. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. As we face an era of unprecedented environmental change, our ability to monitor the health of the planet is becoming increasingly dependent on the sentinel species of the insect world. Because insects are highly sensitive to changes in climate, chemical pollution, and habitat fragmentation, their presence, behavior, and population trends serve as a real-time diagnostic dashboard for the Earth's ecosystems. They are, in a very literal sense, the canaries in the coal mine of the Anthropocene. The study of entomology has thus transitioned from a branch of biology into a cornerstone of environmental science and global sustainability policy. Insects respond to environmental stressors far faster than mammals or birds. A slight shift in mean temperature can alter the flight patterns of pollinators, while the accumulation of heavy metals in soil is immediately reflected in the development of soil-dwelling larvae. By monitoring these microscopic indicators, scientists can detect degradation long before it is visible to the human eye or satellite imagery. This capacity for biomonitoring allows us to map the invisible contours of environmental change. We are learning to decode the buzzing of the meadow and the silence of the forest as indicators of ecosystem stability. When the insects go quiet, it is a catastrophic signal that our environment is reaching a tipping point. The future of environmental monitoring lies in the integration of entomology with artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things (IoT). We are currently developing smart sensors, tiny, automated acoustic and optical devices placed in forests and agricultural zones that can identify species, track movement, and monitor health metrics in real time. These sensors effectively turn the insect world into a global monitoring network. Instead of labor-intensive field surveys, we are using AI to analyze the constant, complex data stream of insect activity to build predictive models of ecosystem health. This technology allows us to monitor the impact of our own climate policies and conservation efforts with unprecedented precision. Furthermore, the role of insects as ecosystem engineers makes them indispensable for environmental restoration. When we attempt to rewild degraded land, it is the reintroduction of specific insect communities that often dictates success. From soil aeration by beetles to the pollination of native flora, these insects are the primary agents of restoration. They are the workforce that physically rebuilds the landscape after we have cleared it. Recognizing this, conservation strategies have shifted from protecting charismatic megafauna to prioritizing the protection of the insect habitats that underpin the entire food web. We are finally acknowledging that to save the environment, we must first secure the home of the insect. The geopolitical and economic value of this monitoring is immense. As water scarcity and agricultural instability become central themes of the coming decades, the data provided by sentinel insects will become a critical asset for national security and resource management. Governments that can leverage this data to anticipate ecosystem shifts will have a distinct advantage in managing their food and water supplies. The insect, once seen merely as a nuisance or a commodity, is now recognized as a vital component of the global intelligence infrastructure. Ultimately, our relationship with the insect as a sentinel is a recognition of our own ecological limits. We have built a global civilization that assumes a stable environment, yet the insects have always operated within a framework of constant environmental flux. By treating them as partners in monitoring, we are learning to live within the bounds of that same reality. The sentinel species are telling us a story about the direction of our planet. The question is no longer whether we are capable of hearing the message, but whether we are willing to act on the warnings they provide. The buzzing of the insect is no longer just a sound of the wild. It is the sound of our early warning system, signaling the fragility and the promise of the world we share. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. As we conclude this exploration of the invisible architects of human history, it becomes clear that our story is not a solo endeavor. From the silk of the moth that clothed our empires to the pollination of the bees that sustained our growth, and from the pests that humbled our ambitions to the sentinels that now guide our environmental stewardship, our trajectory has been steered by the insect world. We are not separate from this kingdom of millions of species. We are deeply, inextricably woven into its fabric. The legacy of the swarm is the mirror in which we see our own fragility, our own ingenuity, and our own profound dependence on the natural systems we so often take for granted. History has frequently been written as a narrative of human conquest, of conquering lands, diseases, and challenges. Yet, a closer examination reveals that our most enduring successes were not those of conquest, but of adaptation. When we thrived, it was often because we learned to work with the biological realities of the insect world, rather than against them. Our greatest disasters, conversely, were rooted in the arrogance of believing that we could dictate terms to an ecosystem that operates on a time scale and a scale of complexity far beyond our own. The insect reminds us that true mastery is not found in dominance, but in the alignment of human activity with the fundamental rhythms of life. Looking forward, the partnership between humanity and the insect world will define the quality of the coming century. As we face the dual challenges of a shifting climate and a growing global population, we must view the insect not as a competitor to be eradicated, but as a technological and ecological collaborator. The future of our food security lies in protecting the pollinator. The future of our medicine lies in decoding the insect's chemical wisdom. And the future of our environmental stability lies in heeding the warnings of our sentinel species. We are entering an era of biomimetic civilization, where our technological progress must be harmonized with the biological intelligence of the planet. This is the ultimate lesson of the swarm. We are part of an ongoing, multi-species experiment. The insects have been here for hundreds of millions of years, navigating extinctions, climate shifts, and the rise of countless civilizations, always persisting, always evolving. By studying them, we are studying the blueprint of longevity. When we look at a single honeybee or a colony of ants, we are looking at the survivors of the deep past and the potential architects of the future. Their resilience is our greatest teacher, and their presence is our most reliable indicator of a world worth living in. As we turn the page on this history, let us recognize that the paper trail of our existence is literally and figuratively supported by the insect. Our legacy will not be defined by the walls we build, but by the biodiversity we conserve and the wisdom with which we navigate our relationship with the smallest, yet most significant inhabitants of our shared home. The buzzing, crawling, and hidden world is not just the backdrop of our story. It is the silent, tireless co-author. Moving forward, may we choose to write a narrative of coexistence, one where the legacy of the swarm continues to flourish alongside us, ensuring that the next chapter of human history is as rich, diverse, and vibrant as the ecosystem that makes our very existence possible. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey.